Well, some economists are now expecting the economy to pick up over the next 2 years, thanks in large part to those tax cuts. So what exactly can we expect? Let's go to market watcher Scott Martin, Heather Zumaraga, and Fox Business Network's Charles Payne, host of Making Money. Good to see you all. You know, I'm looking at J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs. They're all upping their estimates. But Scott Martin, I got to tell you, they're still kind of Scrooge-like because they're saying only 2.1% growth over at J.P. Morgan and 2.5% growth next year at Goldman Sachs. I know you think it's going to look a lot more like 3 or 4% growth. How much do you think tax cuts will affect the economy?
Yeah, Trish, that could be the classic under-promise, over-deliver, which is something we all want to see. I think the tax cuts are going to be a very big deal, whether it's the hundreds of billions or the trillions, whoever you believe, that's coming back stateside, Trish, via corporate tax cuts, obviously, that we're seeing now that are going to go through, but are going to result in buybacks, dividends, CapEx, things we haven't seen in a very long time here in this country. That can make stocks go crazy like Rosie O'Donnell, because I'll tell you why. This has been a corporate environment, you know, we can't deny it, for the last 8 years that has been under siege, that has felt like it was being at least treated very unfairly when it comes to policy and regulation. Those doors are finally being opened to the men and women who lead these great companies in the United States, and that will drive stock prices higher. That's going to benefit your 401k.
All right. The question is, does it translate into economic growth? We'll get to Rosie O'Donnell in just a second, but that's the multi-million-dollar question, right? Heather, in other words, do we see fundamental growth? Do people see an increase in wages? Do we see more jobs, all as a result of the corporate tax cut?
We will see an increase in wages and jobs, and we're already seeing and hearing corporations like FedEx and Wells Fargo and Fifth Third Bank, as well as AT&T, saying that they are going to invest in capital expenditures and hire new employees. And more money in people's pockets will mean more spending. I mean, it's Econ 101, but I am also concerned, Trish, about the debt, and I don't think I'm alone, that over the long run, as we pick up spending fiscally in the government, especially in January, as we're projected to do so, what impact will that have on our debt over the long term?
Yeah, I mean, $20 trillion and still counting, right? I mean, the hope is, of course, that you grow the economy enough via the stimulus that you're actually taking more revenue in, more tax revenue in via corporations, via individuals, et cetera. But, you know, it's got to get proven out. I think it could happen, but we're still talking a lot of money, Charles Payne. And then you add in a $1 trillion infrastructure bill, and we saw that, you know, President Obama had that $800 billion one that didn't go so well.
Well, you know, the lesson learned from the Obama infrastructure deal is that you've got to have the right sort of regulations and cut out bureaucracy. Federal government should not cut any checks until they make sure it actually does go toward infrastructure projects and not to pet projects to local, state and local officials. Now, having said that, I think the virtuous cycle has already begun. We start today. We saw amazing retail sales numbers over the weekend. Yeah. You know, so the tax bill will certainly add to it, and I think the multiplier effect from the corporate tax cuts cannot be overstated. I remember a few years ago when Nancy Pelosi bragged about the multiplier effect from higher welfare payments. So, you know, I mean, really, you guys remember that. So this is the kind of thing that you'll see the immediate impact to people's bottom lines because they'll get a bigger chunk of what they earn. But ultimately, this coupled with infrastructure, a 1-2 punch that will play out over the next couple of years, big time.
All right, let's get to Rosie O'Donnell, because, you know, I know you guys are psyched about this. I know a lot of people are really excited about the tax cuts, but not everyone. So Ms. O'Donnell tweets to Paul Ryan, "Paul Ryan, don't talk about Jesus after what you just did to our nation. You will go straight to hell. You screwed up. Fake altar boy. Judas much." Is her hashtag. Look, I don't know if you can ever make Rosie O'Donnell happy, Scott Martin, but I also don't know as I'd go to Rosie O'Donnell, shall we say, for economic advice.
Nor would I go have eggnog at her house, which apparently I think she maybe had a little too much of there, Trish. And, you know, we all have had those emotional outbursts after maybe a little bit much of this or that. But here's the thing, you know, I think there's a time period here with the holidays and everything going on with the left where they're coming to grips with the fact that Trump's policies are working, that we got this tax plan through, and we have some hope for infrastructure and some hope for actually Congress to maybe come together here and try to get some policies that are going to help the everyday everyday American. And while that's something that maybe deep down everybody really wants, I do think the left and the right wants that. Optically, that's tough for the left to get over, and so
I think you're onto
therefore
something.
these outbursts like this are common.
Unfortunately, I think you're onto something, because it's not just Rosie O'Donnell. I mean, you've got Democrats that are so upset with this plan. Charles Payne, I mean, you've got Democrats. Heck, I mean, you got Bernie Sanders complaining about the plan, saying that it didn't give enough in the way of tax cuts to the middle class. Suddenly, he's been converted into a capitalist who believes in middle-class tax cuts after his socialist ordeal. Anyway, I mean, they can't, because if you think about it, if this is successful, Charles, what is it going to mean for the left come 2018? It's
going to be real tough. I tell you right now, you know, they're taking a huge risk. First of all, I think it's in bad form and really disingenuous to play down how much people are keeping, to say, well, it's only $40 or it's only $50, when the average person out there, if they were able to buy all the Christmas gifts, some of them only needed $150, but it was
40,
all the world
40
to them.
or $50 is a lot of money to the middle class and lower income, Charles. You're exactly right. And I don't think that's getting enough, I guess, good positive marketing in the media. And they're working on their message coming out of the White House and Congress on this tax bill, and I think that's also key to getting across to more Americans. But hey, you're not going to have to, because they're going to see it in their paycheck if they don't already see it in the stock market or in another form.
You still have to market this as a Republican, because it's still going to be playing up class warfare. So they'll say, you got $2 grand, but some rich guy got 60 grand. And we have to resist the notion that, you know, that somehow that's the way we play this in this country. The same tide should lift all boats, and I think the same tide is starting to move.
Yeah, the reality is, though, that people who actually pay more in taxes are not getting as big a tax cut. And in many of these SALT states, they may not get much of a tax cut at all. It may actually be a tax hike. So I would just say that the left's talking points are fundamentally flawed. Just to add one thing to that before we go, the one place where the left is going to be able to get these guys is on the carried interest loophole, because you now have a situation where fat cats like Steve Schwarzman and company making $400 million a year get to pay less in tax than a New York City cop on the income, not on investment. I have no problem paying capital gains. We should all get a break on investment, but on their income. So that could come back to haunt them.
Yeah, they're going to do something about that, Trish, and I think it's because of you. You've been touting that. You've been on them for a long time, and
I'm just trying to help. I'm just doing my part. But they need to fix it. Heather, so good to see you. So good to see you, Scott and Charles. Now.